Like to talk about Joe Biden's performance in the foreign policy realm. Uh, I identify myself in two ways. First, one is I'm a fan of Joe Biden. Um, I actually think he came close to hitting two important home runs in the foreign policy area. Uh, Actually, did hit one and missed on the other, but only slightly through any fault of his own. The second, I live in an age now that where credentials don't seem to matter, but just to say I've got some foreign policy credentials, having, for example, worked at the Center for Strategic and International Studies back in the late 70s, very early 80s on the challenges that American foreign policy faced. Anyway, so much for credentials. I do think that they're more important than people give them credit for now. I mean, some people recommend bleach as if they know more than Anthony Fauci. But let me say that the first thing to be said about Joe Biden and foreign policy is that he reestablished the United States as the leader of the free world. Not a huge accomplishment, just putting it that way. After the former guy who set about antagonizing all of our traditional friends and cozying up to tyrants, I think pretty much any normal American politician would have succeeded at that task. Much of the world depends upon American leadership. Some of the best, most decent, free, prosperous societies look to the United States to lead the way in creating or maintaining a decent international order. So just about any American president would have at least a minimal accomplishment in that area. The first really big test of Biden was in the lead up and beginning of the war in Ukraine. I've been in touch with people who criticize him for not going in all out. I don't know if that's a legitimate criticism. Avoiding a war with the Russians, with two nations with massive nuclear arsenals, is not a trivial responsibility for an American president. We now can perhaps see that the dangers that Putin would make good on his threats, rattling his nukes, was a bluff, and we probably always suspected it was a bluff. But when you're dealing with something like that, suspecting, 4-1, the odds are it's a bluff. That's not good enough odds to be reckless. It was, from my point of view, it looked bold enough to do what we did. But maybe he should have sent them more sooner. I don't know. But even in the lead up, or maybe even especially in the lead up, American intelligence, fortunately, seems to have known a whole lot about what Putin was planning to do. It really suggests that we have, or had, maybe he's dead by now, some kind of source very far into the center of the Kremlin, because we knew a lot. And I think that Biden played his cards really quite wonderfully. The way, I mean, Biden lacks certain, viscerally combative qualities that, John Wayne would never play Joe Biden in a biopic. And sometimes it pays to have a John Wayne in the situation. But he's a great people person. And from what I've been able to discern, he did a great job in establishing himself in a very positive way as the American president with our various allies, the leaders around the world. And so there was a coordinated effort of NATO nations to warn Putin off from invading and to make preparations and to threaten sanctions. And I just think that that the way Biden played that was American diplomacy at its best. And if right now the situation with Ukraine is not as good as we might hope, well, part of that is because there were disappointments having to do with the recent counteroffensive. But I still think that the overall tilt of the table was rolling in the direction of a victory. Well, victory may be too strong a word, but a thorough defeat of Putin and an important humiliation of Putin for his terrible failure. I mean, he misjudged so many things, not least he misjudged Biden, and he misjudged Biden combined with the West, that the two were able to mobilize a coherent response that Putin didn't imagine. I think that I'm not sure about whether a more mediocre American president in that situation would have succeeded in bringing the West together the way Biden did. But it was marvelous, and it was extremely consequential. I mean, making Putin fail in this is so important for American interests, American values. It delivers a huge bang for the buck. I mean, what is it, like 3% of our defense budget? And what it's buying for us against the one of the two major powers in the world that's antagonistic to the United States. The other one being China, but Putin being the more reckless one or the more aggressive one, the one who's been working assiduously for 20 years to undermine the democracy in the West. He's more the enemy of the United States. He's really interested in getting revenge for the American victory in the Cold War. And Biden did a marvelous job mobilizing the West to make him fail. And that failure is of enormous importance and one of the great bargains in history in terms of delivering value. We're not having to put our soldiers on the ground. It isn't American lives that are being lost, and it isn't that much American treasure in the big picture of things. So that's a big one on the plus side for Joe Biden. The second big challenge that he's faced is the one that began on October 7th with the Hamas atrocities against Israel and continues into this moment, just passing 100 days. This is a place where Biden started the situation with what I thought was a spectacular diplomatic pair of moves. I wrote that the historians probably won't credit him for this because they will look at all that unfolded after, and it will not be pretty. But I thought that Biden successfully established himself at the very beginning with an exceptional status in the hearts and minds of the Israelis, with the way that he put himself forward as his inimitably compassionate way, feeling for the pain and trauma of the Israelis, And almost immediately, very soon anyway, uh, beginning to try to utilize the place that he had won in Israel that positioned him to be able to perhaps influence how the Israelis would respond to this terrible attack. I was hopeful. I didn't know how much the unified government in Israel would be balanced between the Netanyahu government and others who might act as a check on the Netanyahu government. I don't trust the Netanyahu government at all to do the right thing, either in terms of their moral quality, which is fascistic, or in terms of their ability to respond in smarter ways that, or wiser ways than those that are just reflexive. I mean, it was quite obvious that Hamas did this to lure the Israelis into doing, well, what the Netanyahu government, what the Israeli government has done. I don't want to claim that I know how the Israelis should have dealt with that situation. I wrote another piece about it was the most complex set of considerations that I've ever seen any decision maker on the world stage having to make. And I started following these kinds of things back in 1956, the year of the Suez Crisis and the revolt in Hungary. I got to be something of a news junkie at the age of 10. And I'd never seen a situation where my habit of putting myself in the place of, well, what would I do? You know, usually it's as an American president, but other situations too. I never seen such a complicated situation. But I feel pretty confident that the way the Israelis have responded has been both a crime and a blunder. So that's getting ahead of the story about talking about Joe Biden. I think that if the Israeli government had been of a different nature, I mean, just as a thought experiment, what if all this had happened during that year when a non-Netanyahu government was in power, with Bennett as the prime minister and this mixed coalition that ran from left to right, from Arab even to Israeli semi-right wing types, not right wing like these guys Smotrich and Ben Gvir, who are just fascists, but right wing in the sense of being hawkish in a Likud kind of a way. Likud being the party of Netanyahu. They split from Netanyahu not because of an ideological difference. Some of these guys. Well, I won't go naming names, but they split with him because they had learned he cannot be trusted. So if that government had been in place, I think that Biden's two-part move of I feel your pain, I am with you, you have my America's complete support, and how about thinking this through a little bit? How about some planning? How about some thought about what comes next? I don't know if he was saying what I would have been saying is how about not walking into the trap that Hamas set? I mean, Hamas is not stupid. So if they're trying to provoke you to create an all-out war in Gaza, where waging a war against the enemy inevitably kills a bunch of the civilians and will antagonize the entire Arab world and completely scuttle the attempt to establish diplomatic ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which I don't fully understand why people say it would be a game changer, but a lot of smart people say it would, and I'm not going to second guess them based on my not knowing. But in any event, Saudi Arabia is the major regional Arab player. And the Abraham Accords, which involved various, little Gulf states and all the way over to Morocco. I mean, that was really good for moving in the direction of Israel having an accepted existence in a part of the world in which just about everything else is Arab and Muslim. That was what the Hamas wanted to scuttle. They wanted the Israelis to do what, to hammer with a blunt instrument against the people who had done unspeakable things to an extraordinary number of Israelis, like 15 times the magnitude of 9/11. Wow, I mean that's really huge, and not just planes flying into a building in a sort of general way of war, of attacking a city. I mean, like the Germans did with the Blitz and all that. We're sort of accustomed to that, and we don't have a picture of outright human evil being dangled before our feet. But when you find out what happened on October 7th, the raping, the killing of babies, the killing of children in front of their parents, and just the most awful things you can imagine. And we who are the heirs of the age of the Holocaust can imagine a lot. Anyway, it was. These are not stupid people. They may be evil, but they're not stupid, and they did all these things to be as offensive and traumatizing as they possibly could be, so that the Israelis would do what they've done, which is, if the figures are to be trusted, and I don't know what the latest thought is about that, but a city of a couple million people or something like that has been, largely leveled with people living in it. It was Hamas who set that up, of course. It was Hamas that used the Gazans as part of their plan to create a regional war, and they've got smart purposes in this respect that to the extent that rather than the Arab world sort of giving a sufficient embrace of Israel, you've got the Arab world up in arms and a wave of anti-Semitism even spreading beyond the region in which the Jewish state is trying to survive. So it is however much many of, I fear that this statement is correct. However many of the Hamas soldiers and leaders that they kill, the result will be the advance of the purpose of Hamas, which is to lead eventually to the destruction of the Jewish state. That it serves the purpose of Hamas against the ultimate purpose of Israel, which is to be a Jewish state on their territory that is entitled to security, enjoys security, and doesn't have to deal with people dedicated to its destruction. That's the polarity of the question of where is the Middle East, the Arab-Israeli question heading. That's the basic question. Will we get to a time when Israel exists at peace in the same way that, let's say, the Belgium exists between France and the Netherlands, and never worries about somebody trying to wipe them off the map, as the Iranians continually talk about Israel. That's the fundamental polarity. And Biden understood to at least an important degree that whether this would be a plus or a minus in the history of the Middle East depended on how the Israelis dealt with these attempts by Hamas to get Israel to do what will turn the world against Israel. And everybody said at the very outset that part of the purpose is to sabotage the whole deal with Saudi Arabia. And it has had that effect. And the thing is widening. There's actually whereas instead of the United States providing a bridge to bring Israel and Saudi Arabia together, which would advance American interests, the whole drama around the Red Sea is starting to divide the Saudis from the United States. As the Iranian-backed Houthis are threatening a vital shipping lane, and America and its allies are doing what they really have to do, which is to say you cannot attack shipping with impunity. But for some reason, the Saudis choose not to back the United States on this. And what a coup for the Iranian side. I mean, I haven't seen anything as successful as this on the side of fascism since Putin in 2016 helped make a man like Donald Trump the president of the United States. I mean, what a bang for the buck Putin got for those efforts. I don't know whether he but here we have Hamas does what is the most naked human evil on October 7th. I mean, as bad as anything that we've seen in our lifetimes. They do that and they get rewarded. It helps them to achieve their purpose and transform a whole region and maybe beyond. It's not been a good outcome. And what did Biden do? He made an effort to put the United States with Israel in a way that would allow us to help move them from falling into that trap into some wiser course of action. And since I don't know for sure what that wiser course for action would be, maybe the Israelis would kill thousands of Palestinian civilians in Gaza. But at the very least, in areas that are not directly related to October 7th, the response against Hamas in Gaza could have been combined with other messages about who the Israelis are. Things like how the settlers have been behaving in the West Bank. It is disturbing to me that there are settlers who are doing things to Palestinians that could be described as pogroms. And the Israeli government is not fully taking the side of the rights of Palestinians not to be treated in that ugly way. The Israeli government could have combined, at the very least, the most aggressive stuff in Gaza with other signals about building a good relationship with the Palestinians. and pointed the way toward what they wanted to build. But the problem is the Netanyahu government doesn't want to build that. They don't want a two-state solution. I don't know quite how they envision. I mean, are they thinking they can drive all the Palestine as they absorb the West Bank into Judea and Samaria into Israel? What's happening with the Palestinians? Are they just sort of dispossessed? Are they driven into Jordan? I don't know quite how they envision it, but the present Israeli government, well, ever since Netanyahu has been in power, there has been an effort to sabotage any efforts of a two-state solution, actively working to make it not a conceivable possibility. I won't go into the details, but never until this government, this Netanyahu government, which has brought in extremists, fascists, Jewish nationalists, the kind of people who are just, if Putin can invade Ukraine because all he cares about is what he wants for himself and the things he identifies with. Well, these are guys who can feel that way about everything for us and nothing for them. That's how they've been treating the Palestinians during this year plus now of this particular Netanyahu government. He had to bring these people in to keep himself in power, and he's the kind of sociopath who's like Trump, who's willing to do obvious damage to his own country if that's what's required to serve his own personal interest. He wants to stay out of jail like Trump does, and he needed to be in power. It's clear that he thought, and he was willing to bring the devil into his. For one thing, he's not all that offended by evil, but for another thing, he was willing to hurt his country by creating this government, which was the only way to get himself back into power. And how much he's hurt his country is beyond what we might have imagined. Their heavy-handedness, and let me just say, I don't know if Biden should have recognized that he shouldn't, and this is where I come down, if he had understood what the Israelis were going to do, he would not have tied himself and the United States so closely with Israel. In retrospect, it was a mistake. The United States has been hurt by having tied itself so closely with Israel at a time when the world is in revulsion. They're not looking at what happened on October 7th as much as they're looking at what's going on in Gaza right now, which is that the Israelis have been killing a lot of Palestinian civilians. I don't know if he should have foreseen it. I mean, I was dazzled by his performance in setting that up. And based on what I knew, I thought it quite possible that he would have hit a big home run there, that he would have succeeded in establishing the United States, the leader of the United States, in such a position where he could actually steer the Israelis away from the cliff. I also have to confess that I don't know for sure that the Israelis could have been led away from the cliff. I've been surprised to find out that so much of the Israeli public the Israeli public is not complaining, as far as I can tell, about this attack on Gaza representing you falling into a trap that was set for you. It seems as though the Israeli public fully supports what the government is doing. And where there's conflict, it's got to do with the hostages. And that seems misguided to me, but I won't go into that. But I care about the lives of hostages, but there are a lot of other lives, like even members of the IDF. What is it? Over 160 soldiers that have been killed in this action. So lives are lives, and what's bigger than individual lives is the whole destiny of the nation, of the region, and in some ways of the world, because solving this problem would go a long way to helping the world become a more peaceful place. And there are various flashpoints where things are unresolved in the world, and this isn't the only threat, but it's been a continuous threat. Well, for a very, I don't know whether you would want to go between the two world wars, but certainly since World War II, this problem between Israel and the Arabs has been a major flashpoint for the world since the United Nations created Israel in 1948. So resolving this would be a big deal, and I think that it's a kind of folly not to focus so much energy on the lives of hostages when things that are huge, that involve the whole future of things, have got to be front and center, have to be outweighing the immediate tangible costs. If we can't think about our future in terms of the battle between the forces of destruction and the forces of making things whole, if we can't see that that is the main assignment, what chance have we got as a species? But anyway, I don't know if Biden is to be faulted for not knowing what kind of government he was going to be trying to influence. But I do fault Biden for not using his leverage more, sooner, and more publicly. The word floats around that the United States has no leverage over Israel. The word comes out of our governing circles, out of the Biden administration, that assures that the American tangible material support is not contingent on anything about what the Israelis do. I don't fully know what the President of the United States hears from the experts on the area, but I have difficulty imagining that it wouldn't be better under these circumstances, with the Netanyahu government plunging headlong into this trap, for the United States to be the friend of Israel by applying public pressure and saying, well, we've got your back, but not as much as you would if you would behave decently and would listen to what we're saying, because you are acting in a way which is not only contrary which is contrary to the interests of Israel. You are hurting your country by doing this and not doing that. Well, if I were president in Biden's, that's the one place where I think I would be acting differently. It was a brilliant opening move, and at the time I could imagine it would be one of history's great accomplishments. It was amazing to see his capacity to choreograph this dance of the two parts, uh, uh, so that there were billboards in Tel Aviv expressing profound thanks to the American president at their most painful moment, and that, but adding to it uh, the nudging in the right directions so that the Israeli response would utilize this situation not to advance the cause of Hamas, but to advance the cause of Israel. And I don't, and as the Netanyahu government acts the way you would expect sociopathic fascists to act, which is not representative of Israel per se. There is a large constituency for having a government as decent as that nation on balance is. I've been to Israel. I have not ever been in a country where I felt so much richness, so much various kinds of good energy that was expressing itself in a variety of ways in culture and in science and the high tech world. There's just and in literature and movies, it's just an enormous accomplishment. I was very excited to be there. There is something good that can be that Israel can represent in the world, and I would have tried to, as president, present the issue publicly that this is what's required. We need Israel's basic goodness to be on display at the same time as Israel does what it needs to do to protect itself from attacks like this and a force like this that governs something that has that's right up against the Israeli border and that's embedded. Okay, all that, but to compose whatever would be the optimal set of things, I would have had even if. I'll give it Biden credit for a beautiful performance at the beginning, but he tied us too close for too long to an Israel that wasn't doing the right thing, and I think that that's a mistake, and it's the kind of mistake that I would expect Biden to make. I think Biden's a wonderful person with great strengths, but I've never supported. I didn't support him when he ran in 2008. He wasn't my choice in 2020, though I ended up thinking he was the only one, perhaps, that could have beat Trump. I would have had Elizabeth Warren, but you got to beat Trump. That's the crucial thing, and I ended up being very strongly behind Biden at the point when it was either going to be him or Bernie Sanders. But I've never been for Biden, and as the 2019 campaign was unfolding, I found that Obama hadn't known how to deal with the Republicans. He didn't know how to fight people who are acting like their enemies. And Biden felt to me like he was going to be more of that same kind of weakness. I wanted somebody who was going to call out what the Republican Party had become. And Biden wasn't the guy for that. I mean, Lindsey Graham talks about he's as good a human being as God made. And I've seen a video where he's just an incredible person for reaching out and making a good human bond with other people. He is a fundamentally decent, good, open-hearted guy. That's why, Lindsey Graham said, if you don't like Joe Biden, there's something wrong with you. Well, there are weaknesses that come with that virtue. It's not easy to have all the virtues, to be not only a master at forming the positive human bond, but fully adept at dealing with evil when it's coming at you. Um, it, it, so if Biden has not been hard enough on the Israelis and utilized the power in his hands as the American president, Israel needs the American president to be backing it. And there are all kinds of ways you can avoid letting them go down the tubes, but you can also not be backing them. And it's the same kind of thing as with the Republicans. If I were president, I would have used that bully pulpit with respect to Trump and the Trump party very aggressively. I would be calling out what the Republicans have become under Trump on a continuing basis, pointing at every opportunity to show the American people that something has taken over the Republican Party that is contrary to all of our values. So that's Biden is not the guy for that role. Obama was not the guy for that role. So it's one of Biden has great strengths. They've been on display in the international order. But in this particular situation with Israel, it turns out that Biden has acted in a way that has hurt American interests. I think most of the damage has been done. A correction at this point would be helpful. But it could have been danced a whole lot more effectively had it been danced right from the beginning. As soon as it became evident that the Israelis were not doing what they needed to do, at that point, the tying yourself to Israel had to be loosened progressively the further down that trail Israel went. Hardball is called for when you're dealing with people like Netanyahu and these Israeli fascists that he's brought in from the world that was considered so far outside of what's decent that no previous coalition would ever have thought to include these guys. As they allowed fascism, the spirit of fascism, to dictate their response, not only on the West Bank, but in the Gaza war. The United States should have positioned itself as the defenders of the values that we stand for, which are the same as the values that we stand for in Ukraine. We stand for decent, humane societies, free societies. And Israel, for all of the difficulties there have been, there is a free society there in a way that's worthy of praise. We stand with Israel because we share values, and that phrase has been used, but those values haven't been adequately defended by the administration. Once, as Israel's being under the thrall of a fascist force became evident, the defender of democracy had to distance itself and apply pressure on Israel. The idea that the United States has no leverage on Israel, I've heard it, but I can't imagine that it's true. It's not easy to push people around, and the Israelis are very tough people. But every dance can be choreographed in importantly different kinds of ways. And the art of that in this situation could have gone a long way. So I love Biden. so glad to have a president of the United States that behaves on the world stage in a way that makes me proud. His decency and his honorability and his willingness to engage and for positive purpose are evidently on display. I am happy for him to be the guy running an American foreign policy. But he's been dealt several very difficult hands, and he gets an A+ on Ukraine, and I'm not sure what grade to give him on Israel. It's a mixed bag. Uh, but he and Blinken and his administration have shown themselves to be very competent at a lot of levels in a lot of situations, and they don't always get it exactly right. But I'll give him a well, I don't know how much to take off. I want to give him a B+, but the mistakes on Israel might be maybe need to be given more weight. Anyway, that's how I see it. I think about these things. This is all connected with my better human story. I regard the survival of human civilization as being a toss-up over the next not so many generations. I think that we are, as a species, engaged in a massive struggle to try to get our act together as a mighty global civilization, get our act together enough so that we can survive for the long haul, because we can see that there are ways we might destroy ourselves because we've become so mighty. We've become so mighty and we haven't yet become so well ordered. So all this stuff having to do with American foreign policy and the battle between a force that would do what they did on October 7th and the force that we would depend upon to have a chance to get human civilization well enough ordered soon enough so that we can survive and thrive instead of destroy ourselves. Well, that's my better human story, and I see all this in that context, and I invite people to go if you're interested in seeing how this whole situation of fascism in the United States, fascism in Israel, fascism, a battle between different in political spirits, you might say, that's going on around the world, and it really maps onto what the nature of the forces are that are going to determine whether in the next 200 years we've destroyed ourselves or whether we've developed a civilization in which ugly things like this don't happen, and which the catastrophes like climate change looks like don't happen. You know, that we've got a choice to make, and the spirit of fascism and the spirit of decent, humane, free societies and democracies, that is one of the embodiments of the question of which of these forces is going to win out in terms of where human civilization ends up. I hope that if you're interested in seeing a big picture that shows some interesting things about the story of our species, I claim to show that there are really that a creature taking a step onto the path of civilization like our species did 10 or 12,000 years ago inevitably unleashes a social evolutionary force. And that force in action is destructive in a consistent way, and you can trace how it moves through the human world, and essentially that we're in a drama that is an inevitable thing that emerges with something so unprecedented as a civilized society. I hope that if this kind of a picture that puts human nature, our understanding of ourselves and of why history has been so ugly. It's not human nature writ large, this ugliness that we see in the human world. It's a dynamic that means that any creature on any civil planet, anywhere in the cosmos, that embarked on the path of civilization would have unleashed a destructive force of this sort. And by embarked on a path of civilization, I mean to take the unprecedented step of inventing their own way of life, extricating themselves in meaningful ways from the niche in which they had evolved biologically. Well, I think I can present a coherent picture, and I will invite you to go if you're interested. If you would be interested if such goods were delivered. I think I can promise you something. If you'll go to my website, abetterhumanstory.org. That'll just do it. Just abetterhumanstory.org will take you there, and I lay it out in an elaborate and a systematic way, and I don't think you'll be disappointed there. There is a picture to be had here that clarifies the nature of what we're dealing with and who we are. We are better creatures than we have imagined ourselves to be. I claim that I can essentially prove that. I don't know how much better, but I can claim that, as I said, the ugliness we see in the world around us is an inevitable result of the systemic dynamic that emerges whenever a creature extricates itself from the natural order. That has implications, and and that the battle that gets unleashed by the disorder that you get when you leave the natural order, you plunge into an unprecedented kind of disorder, and there's a systemic dynamic that arises from a disorder where it is anarchy. There is no order above to regulate in any way how the actors behave. Whereas in the natural order, and this is really where the evolutionary perspective comes in the natural order, everything has been ordered in a way that serves the whole, because the natural selection selects for things that are able to move forward. But there's nothing like that when civilization emerges. It's inevitable there'll be anarchy. Anyway, out of all that, there is a dynamic of a battle between two coherent forces. Two coherent forces, one that makes things consistently more whole, which is aligned with life, and one which grows out of the war of all against all that anarchy entails. And it consistently works to make things worse. This is the picture that I say is any creature on any planet's gonna. It's not a reflection of human nature. That's how I know that we are better creatures than we appear to be. But there's a lot of ugliness because we haven't brought these forces under control. And when you're talking about the battle between democracy and fascism, when you talk about the battle between the force in America that's represented by Joe Biden, he's going to be the champion of a set of forces that are threatened by the Trump force that has arisen in America. When you see that battle, ultimately it is a manifestation of something which has been very big and embedded in the unfolding drama of human civilization since a destructive social evolutionary process became a countervailing force that came up against the life-serving forces that emerged with the various ways that life evolved, where a process which is consistently choosing what can survive or what cannot. What Joe Biden represents is the force of life, and what Trump represents is the spirit of death and destruction, of brokenness, of injustice, of untruth. I mean, it's just so consistently broken. It just so consistently has an impact on the world that makes things worse. It's an extraordinary, usually things are rather mixed, actors on the world, they're usually mixtures of good and evil. But, the people who did October 7th, they are not a mixture. What they did on October 7th tells you, this is something which is really in the grip of a force that acts very much like evil. A force of destruction, a force of brokenness. That's what the battle between the force that gave us October 7th went up against, should have been answered by the force of Israel that's aligned with a whole lot of goodness. But it got a different Israel. And the force that's represented by Trump and his insurrection and his battle against the rule of law and his willingness to commit, to destroy the constitutional order to get his own revenge and keep himself out of jail. I mean, this is good and evil. And basically, it doesn't have to be called that. But why not see it in those terms? Because these forces consistently makes the world better or worse, more whole or more broken. Isn't that a good definition of what we would mean if we thought there was such a thing as two coherent forces called good and evil that were embattled against each other to determine who gets to shape the human world? Ultimately, whether the world of human civilization will get its act together to survive for the long haul, or whether it will destroy itself, the ultimate outcome of a battle that emerged inevitably when a creature takes that unprecedented step. That's what I got a book back there called The Parable of Tribes that lays this out, that there is something crucial about that point where human beings did what no creature had ever done in the 3.5 billion years of life on Earth, of starting to invent its own way of life and to create a way of life that's not been shaped by natural selection, but by the creative intelligence of the creature itself. But not just the creative, the systemic dynamic necessitated that of the various creations that came out of this creative intelligence that makes civilization possible, only certain ones would survive and spread. Anyway, Trump represents, Hamas represents, unfortunately, to some extent, the Israeli government of today represents, Putin represents, the Chinese menacing Taiwan and encroaching on Filipino waters and squelching the free society of Hong Kong. There is a force afoot in the world that isn't opposed by perfection, but by something which is far more aligned with the force of life. That if we have a chance of getting our act together, it will be from people like Joe Biden and from nations like the nations of the European Union and Australia and Canada, and as the United States must be. So the election of 2024 represents a huge battle, a showdown between the force of democracy, such as we have it, led by Joe Biden, and the force of fascist tyranny, which in the American political context is manifesting as Trump and the Trump party and the Trump base. That is the battle. And it maps on a whole, democracy versus fascism maps rather well with a force that makes things more whole versus a force that has consistently destructive impact on the world. All part of the historic human drama that ensues, not because there's anything inherently wrong with us, but because we have this unprecedented ability in the history of life to, we've got that creative intelligence where we are able to, start changing the game rather than having to play the game in which we evolved. So that, the beginnings of horticulture or herding the animals we used to hunt into pens. It's a marvelous thing. What a piece of work is man. We're so creative. We were able to take the cultural space and develop it to the point where we actually change the possibilities in radical ways. We could become larger and organized in different ways, not like hunter-gatherer bands that were basically continuations of primate bands. We took a crucial step, and there are consequences for it. And that proves actually to be the key to understanding what we are, that we're better creatures than we think we are. What are the challenges that we need to face, that we need to meet for our unprecedented step to result in the triumph of life and not of death? Of a force of good helping us make things more whole, not the force of evil that makes things more broken, that leads to 20,000 dead bodies in the rubble of Gaza and tens of thousands of casualties on the battlefields of Ukraine. It's a force of death. Fascism is a force of death. It's not for nothing that a fascist sundered the peace of Europe in the form of Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And we need to have a system that's organized so that one actor cannot play so great a role. The spirit of the gangster has played a disproportionate role in shaping the human world. And fascism is the spirit of the gangster. People talk about Trump as a mob boss. Well, it is the spirit of the gangster. And you can see that in all the early civilizations. What triumphs in anarchy is the spirit of the gangster. And so what Trump represents is essentially the very thing that's been problematic in the human world from the beginnings of civilization that led to the first tyrannies and mass enslavements. It is a recognizable spirit, and it shows up once in a while in stark fashion. The Trump party is exceptional in not being a mixture. It shows us the nature of evil. And the secular worldview needs to evolve in a variety of ways, in which one of which is to include perceiving what's there. And what's there is something that is perfectly appropriate to call evil. Biden is not really great at dealing with evil, though that dance with Putin was magnificent. But he has difficulty when it calls for, I don't know, maybe dealing with your friends. Biden's the great friend, and he's the guy who spent all these years in the Senate, and he regards all these politicians as his friends that he knew all this time. he needed to be able to see them as having become swept up in the magnetic field and willingly made themselves instruments of evil. And likewise, he loves Israel, and he hasn't had the ability to perceive that that part of Israel that's governing is a part to which the evils of Israel have coalesced. The evil part of Israel has been in power to too great an extent. And Biden's job was to differentiate between goodness and the friend and stick with goodness when the two parted. So, but we have to understand that the choices that we've got are between a man with great strengths, but some also with some weaknesses, who is the representative of the good right now. He is our champion. He is the one who's got to succeed. And he deserves that support. He has played a lot of cards really well, and his intentions are always impeccable. I'm convinced of that. I don't think he ever acts in a way that if I knew what he thought he was choosing among the options, I think he's choosing the one that he thinks, and with some reason, will do the best to make good things happen. And in those first 2 years, he actually accomplished quite a bit, as it turned out. It was pretty ugly to watch, but he ended up with a record of real accomplishment. And I don't know if history is going to give him credit for what he accomplished. And of course, the great tragedy is that the American people didn't see that the Trump force needed to be repudiated utterly because it had now become a threat to the very survival of American democracy. I mean, after the insurrection and the big lie, it needed to be evident to all Americans, because we're supposed to be committed to to protect and defend the Constitution, that this Trump force that made a dogma of the big lie, which was an assault on the Constitution, had to be opposed by so many Americans that it would just be completely repudiated. But the American people did not either realize what was at stake in 2022 well enough to keep power in the hands of the Democrats. And so we've got this Congress that has accomplished less than any Congress in modern history. And why? Because it's been taken over by the force of brokenness. Because the Republicans took over the House, and it then became impossible to accomplish anything. So that's what the bully pulpit should be used for. I'm glad that Biden is starting to emerge into campaign mode and denouncing the MAGA Republicans, but he should have been doing it all along. That's what my gut tells me. That's where I've been coming from for almost 20 years while I've been watching this thing rise, is that America has to be made to see this. And I believe that the majority of Americans can be made to see it. And so if Biden is not really good at accomplishing that, and he did accomplish something in 2022. It did work. It just needs to be done more aggressively, and I hope other voices will emerge to do it, because Biden is really the only choice any American has when it comes to the presidential race. Lest they be either oblivious to the obvious drama that's unfolding in the American power system of democracy versus fascism, either being indifferent to the outcome or incapable of seeing what's clearly there. And so the political task is to promote Biden as what we need to support, and that involves helping the American people to see what's at stake. So I wish I could give Biden an A plus on American foreign policy? Hey, it's a big, really difficult job. Presidents don't have perfect records. It's managing this disordered world is not easy, and uh, on balance, uh, Biden Biden has been decent and basically competent. Hasn't played all the cards perfectly, but he's been good at advancing American interests in almost every situation. So, no problem with reelecting Joe Biden. We're in good hands. The people around him are smart. He puts good people around him. He takes good advice, and he knows how to run a team. He knows how the system works. He's been a good president. He has a record of real accomplishment. And the only reason he doesn't have more accomplishment is the American people didn't understand well enough what's going on to keep power out of that force. I mean, you don't want Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and the dregs like that controlling the whole potentialities for accomplishment. If you control the House, which this group did, which this group has, then nothing can be accomplished that requires legislation, and most things require legislation. And now what's her name? What's her name? Cheney. Liz Cheney calls the Putin wing of the Republican Party is endangering Biden's great accomplishment as they do the work of Putin and block our aid to Ukraine, which is just crazy. It is acting on behalf of the force of fascism by rescuing Putin from his disasters that could be historically of huge value to the future of civilization, which, by the way, needs to get its act together lest we destroy ourselves and maybe bring down upon ourselves the whole kingdom of life that has been accomplished on this planet, and which is, I say, sacred. So this is our task. And if you want to see whether I can make all this weaving together hold up, if it would matter to you, if it actually did hold up, I hope you'll check us out, betterhumanstory.org. I've been working very hard for over 50 years in developing all this and obsessively. And I do think that the case is made compellingly that puts a lot of the fundamental things that are central to understanding our situation in an importantly different light. That's the feeling that this could help where we land on the tipping point about successfully meeting the challenge of ordering our civilization well enough and soon enough that we don't destroy ourselves. I feel I'm basically why I'm doing videos like this is my sense that it could help us affect the outcome. If it's a toss-up, anything that helps us understand what we need to accomplish, why things are the way they are, anything that contributes to that will make us better able to navigate this into a successful outcome. A successful outcome meaning life will continue on this planet, and civilization will become an adornment to life on Earth, and not the time bomb that it looks like it might become. There's nothing more important than that, and I feel I gotta do whatever I can to get that as much into the thinking of our civilization, because I see several ways in which it might help affect the outcome. Most immediately in the election of 2024, the American people must see. Words don't need to be used, but it must see the battle in terms of a battle between good and evil. They must have passion for the victory of the side represented by Biden over the side represented by Trump. in the same way that our passions get engaged by the films which sort of enact the battle between good and evil in sort of mythic ways, like the Star Wars trilogy, how we feel about Luke and his pals destroying the Death Star. And like the Lord of the Ring and the noble hobbits from the Shire, against the ugliness that is unleashed from, I don't remember the Tolkien's names for things, but we have this feeling about the battle between good and evil, and we have a passionate involvement that the efforts of goodness should succeed and triumph. And then in Avatar, which is perhaps my favorite of them, the sacred gets entwined with that tree of life in a way that speaks to my own sense of beauty and spirituality and life and the sacred. And we get involved with how these blue people that our hero has become one of resist the destructive force of greed in that and viciousness in that military industrial complex, willing to destroy the planet in its search for unobtainium, and the romance with the blue girl that shows the heart of life and the sacred realm of life and those little things floating around, some kind of a holiness that imbues the whole world of life against the destructive force that ultimately has to be fought. And we experience the passions. This is what the challenge of political rhetoric must be for the upcoming campaign, to express in whatever way will best enlist the passions of the American electorate on behalf of the force of the good and of life against the force of evil, as in those major cinematic blockbusters. The response of people to those movies show that we have a capacity to have a kind of moral and spiritual passion that we bring to the battle. And that is what will fortify us most for the battle that must be fought and won now in the 2024 election as part of this larger battle that the whole embarkation on the path of civilization has condemned humankind to. abetterhumanstory.org. If you've listened this far, I'm grateful. Thank you.